wonderful story, Emma. Such a wonderful story. And what a moment, and such a simple moment. But I promise you, they're so impressionable at that age that you've drilled that idea into a mind. As you were talking, you reminded me of a couple of things that I've gone through with my son. So as you know, Zach is 10 now. Um, but when he was 3 years old, Emma, and I'm sure you've heard me tell the story before, when he was 3 years old, I Christmas came around, and instead of going out and buying him, a typical uh, toy for a child, I thought to myself, this year for Christmas, I'm going to buy him a self-talk album for kids. And there's a wonderful author by the name of Dr. Shad Helmstetter, Helm Stetter, and he's authored a book called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. So it's all about self-talk, and I think, in fact, his website is called Self-Talk Revolution or Solution or something like that. And so I hopped onto his website, and I was looking at the self-talk albums, and I seen here he's got a self-talk album for 1 to 7-year-olds and 7 to 14, I think it was. So I bought the one for 1 to 7-year-olds, and remember, Zach was 3 at the time. So, every weekend when we'd be together, or even during the school run in the morning, I had the self-talk album going. So all empowering ideas. And Dr. Shad Helmstetter had the voice on this. There were 6 tracks on it. The voice was in the voice of a bear, Shadrach the bear, obviously to connect or relate to where the kids are. And I still remember we played it so much, those 6 tracks, over and over, Emma, over and over. I still remember some of the ideas. One of the things which Zach and I still talk about today is when I talk to myself. So the bear says now in the self-talk album, the bear says, when I talk to myself, I say the right words. I can do it. I believe in myself. And every day I'm getting stronger and taller and braver and smarter and happier. And then the bear says it, and then he says, now, okay, you say it. And then, watching Zach in the car talking back to this bear all the time. And for the first, this started when he was 3 years old, and I'm pretty disciplined. Like whenever he was in the car, I stuck with it. I played it, Emma, even though I couldn't see any shifts or changes. But I understanding how the paradigm is programmed, I thought, no, let me go with this. And I didn't see anything until COVID. So here COVID hits 2020. He's just turned 6 years old. He's at home with his mom, obviously doing a bit of homeschooling because everybody confined to our homes. And one day his mother sends me a picture of something he had written. And long story short, on the animation he was moving, he was watching, excuse me, the animation he was watching, it said something about I can't achieve it, or I can't attain this goal. It was literally typed, and he paused it and he realized, but something's not right there. He went to the room and he got a piece of paper and a pen and he wrote on it, I can. So he didn't agree with that. And another, that was the first sign I could pick up. And then the other thing I picked up one day, I took him also around the pandemic. He was learning how to skate on a skateboard. And he's right-footed, but he was putting his right foot over the top of the skateboard and pushing the skateboard with the left foot. And he was doing it incorrectly. So I took him to a local mall here, and I went onto one of the parking levels where there were no cars, so it was clear and smooth. And he was trying to skate, and I was telling him, no, put your left foot here, pump with your right foot, and bring it square on the back. And he kept doing it. Emma struggled for about a half an hour because he was now moving from the other side to this side. And he kept doing it, and he kept falling off or coming off the skateboard. He wasn't getting it right. And eventually, about a half an hour later, he gets it right, and there's he going, and he's on the skateboard, and he's, really going. And I'm getting excited at the back. I'm like, yes, you got it, man. Well done. This little cocky bugger gets off, Emma. he turns around and he looks at me and he says, you know, I got that right. He says, because I believe in myself. 6 years old. And
Wow.
that's really, I mean, you know, the only gift that I wish I could give him is a gift of confidence, the gift of that believing in yourself. You know, the challenges will come, life will test you, nothing's perfect. But if you've got that inner voice that says, I can, you know, I believe in myself. And I mean, yeah, I think you know, Emma, coming around this information in relation to paradigm, in relation to programming, um, we in a position to leave our kids better off. But you see, here's the thing, right? We're all not aware, and I know for a large time part of my life, I wasn't aware of what's really controlling us, how this inner program, the subconscious programming operates. I really didn't know, and you know, once you know better, then you can do better, right?
Definitely, definitely. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Lee. That was, yeah, fantastic. I bet that kind of hit you a bit when he said it to you. Hilarious. I'm imagining it. So please do go on and talk about, you were going to talk about a story from Bob, was it? With regards to paradigms?
So, you know, people in your audience that are maybe on a property journey, you've set a big property goal. I want to tell you a story that you might connect with. So, my mentor, the late and legendary Bob Proctor, in 1961, he was a fireman. He was a fireman in Toronto, and he was earning $4,000 a year, which is probably a pretty average or an average income way back in 1961 if we take inflation into account. But he owed $6,000. So he was earning 4,000 and he owed six. And when he used to tell the story, he said he was in an impossible situation. If he had worked for a whole year and a half just to repay debt, he'd have nothing to live on. And during his time at the fire station there was a man who used to come around, a man by the name of Raymond Stanford. And Ray obviously seen something in Bob, or he took a liking to him. And one day he decided, I'm going to wake this man up. And he said to Bob Proctor, he said, Bob, you've got to be one of the most miserable people that I've ever met. And Bob says, you know, as much as that shocked him, right, Emma? He says, you know, he had to admit that there was some truth to what this man was saying. He wasn't a very happy guy. Then Ray said to him, he said, you always seem to be sick. I mean, you don't have any terminal illness, but you always seem to be coming down with something. You know, the sniffles, a headache, something's up with you. And once again, Bob had to agree. There was truth to that. And then thirdly, Ray said, you never seem to have any money. And like I've just said, you know, Bob earned 4,000, he owed six. Then Ray said to him, he said, do you think I'm a happy guy? And once again, Bob had to admit this guy always had a spring in his step. He was always upbeat, always seemed positive. And secondly, Ray said to him, have you ever seen me when I was sick? Bob had never seen this man when he was ill. And thirdly, Ray said to him, have you ever seen me when I was broke? And Bob Proctor said this is the one thing that grabbed his attention most about Ray Stanford. This man always seemed to have a roll of cash on him. And Ray said to Bob, he said, your way's not working. Why don't you try my way? And then, as you know, Emma, he gave Bob Proctor a copy of this book. He gave Bob a copy of this book, Think and Grow Rich, by Napoleon Hill. And he said to Bob, if you study a little bit from this book and you do exactly what this man, the author, suggests, you can have anything you want. So read a little bit from it every day and then implement it. You can have anything you want. Bob says there's no way he could have believed what this man was telling him. This man is saying, I got to read a little bit of this book. And he said, you know, I'll give you a couple of other suggestions. And if you follow it, you can have anything you want. He says there's no way he could believe it. But he said this man, Ray Stanford, said it with such conviction that he didn't believe it. but he believed Ray believed it, and for some strange reason, he done exactly what the man suggested. Within a year, Emma, and you know the story, within a year, he had multiplied his income by 43 3/4. He took his income from $4,000 a year to $175,000 a year within the first year. And his life took off. And, you know, he when he was alive, he used to speak about being consciously competent, or unconsciously competent. So a lot of people are doing well, but they don't know what they're doing so differently. So it's then non-transferable, let's say, to our kids or to those around us. But when you're consciously aware, or you're consciously competent, you're consciously aware of what you're doing differently, what's gotten you from where you were to where you are, then it becomes transferable, right? And he didn't know. He was unconsciously competent. He was making good money, but he didn't know what had shifted. But then he started studying with some really smart individuals, one of them being Leland Val Vanderwell. And it took him 9.5 years to figure out what had actually happened. But through the repetitious study of books like this, you know, listening to programs, all Nightingale's programs like Lead the Field, it was that repetitious study over and over and over, reading the same book through over and over, implementing, revising, you know, listening to these audios over and over, just like I done with Zach, right? Just like you doing with Rosabella, drilling these ideas into them. He realized what he had actually done was he had shifted his paradigm, and then he understood, okay, so by rereading this, because when you understand how the subconscious paradigm is formed, yes, it's genetic programming, but it's also formed through constant spaced repetition, right? So, in fact, I was doing a presentation last night and I spoke about, Emma, there's this term in personal development circles that where we talk about from default to design. I mean, there seems to be such a lot of negativity in the world. And that's what we're all subject to. That's those of us that are not consciously in control of our thinking, our minds wide open, and all of those ideas are just being absorbed, being sucked into that paradigm. And if our paradigm is determining our results, where we go, what we believe we're capable of, whether you believe your property goal, you're going to achieve it or not. If it's determining all of that, we got to make sure that we understand the paradigm and then take control of it and install ideas in there that's going to move you towards what you want, so that you're not struggling with this internal battle, this internal friction constantly, where you know you can do better, you want better, but you're just not stepping out and doing better because this programming is literally holding us back.
Wow, yeah. So that is a huge thing, and something before I met you, and I'd read Think and Grow Rich many times, but for whatever reason, I wasn't able to, and this is where having a mentor like yourself or a coach comes into it. I couldn't understand myself enough to understand how to get the teachings into my life. And that was really huge. So when you're talking about these, you know, these goals, and knowing that clearly the paradigms perhaps that we have at the moment are not helping us. Like, we may have tried to get there, we may have tried to do things like you mentioned at the beginning of the session, that you've hit some goals, but not necessarily all of them. So I'm the same. I've hit some goals, but if you were to just read my goal, this one particular goal, it probably doesn't look like I've even nearly hit it. But honestly, I'm so thrilled in having only done a tiny part of that goal, because it was such a huge goal anyway. But and the it's actually the number of properties that I wanted to buy, but the properties that I have purchased are so enormous and have such value that actually I'm over the moon that it didn't quite look like my original goal. So with these kind of, you know, understanding that we do need to change these paradigms, we've all been to the gym on the 1st of, or not, maybe on the 2nd of January, and then by the 15th, you're not going there anymore. How can we really start to understand how to change these paradigms?
So, like you say, mentorship, right, Emma? But I think we have to start in learning how to change those paradigms is we've got to understand the mind. Like, we've got to understand the mind and how the mind works. Like, a lot of people deify the intellect, right? So we sold the idea that knowledge is power, and go and get the degree, get the MBA, and then you'll have arrived, So we deify the intellect, but the intellect, your conscious thinking mind, your intellectual mind, is only where you're using 2 to 4% of your power there. Your subconscious emotional mind, which is where the paradigm lives, and that's what we've been talking about, all this while. Where the paradigm lives, that's your emotional mind. That's where the habits, the belief system, the self-image, how you see yourself, everything's programmed in there. And that controls 96 to 98% of our results, our perceptions, and our behaviors. So in other words, your subconscious mind, and once again, we first need to learn how to understand, or we first need to understand the mind and how it operates. The subconscious mind is your emotional mind. It controls 96 to 98% of your results, your perceptions, and your behaviors. So it's your power source. It's literally your power source. People deify the intellect, and that's why people become so discouraged, right? Emma, you speak about, you studied all of these personal development books. I mean, people gather books. They've got all of these self-help books. I mean, self-help is just a huge genre in terms of reading around the world, right? Everybody seems to be into self-help these days. But we've got a running joke in the industry. I heard this from a colleague. We call it shelf help. We a lot of people go shelf help. So,
and shelf development.
Shelf help, development. So they go, they read the book, they understand it, right? They understand it, and it makes them feel good while they're studying it. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. But when you look at the results don't shift, or the behavior doesn't shift. So they gather the information, they gather all of this knowledge on these particular subjects, on goals, habits, attitude, fear, whatever it is that you're working to overcome or you're working towards. You study all of this, but we gather it all up here and we become top heavy. So this idea that knowledge is power, knowledge is no such thing. Knowledge is only potential power, applied knowledge. That's where the power is. So it's where you take knowledge and you internalize it, you make it a part of your paradigm, you make it a part of who you are, and then you start acting like it. Like, think about this, Emma. We all know what confidence looks like, right? So we've got an intellectual picture, an idea, but most people are not stepping out confidently, or they're not showing up as a confident individual because of the subconscious program, the self-image program in there. And that's why you've got to understand the mind. And the other thing I wanted to say in relation to understanding the mind, there's only one of two ways that you're going to take an idea from your conscious thinking mind, which is 2 to 4% of your power, and move it into your paradigm, your subconscious mind. One of two ways. One is like this, bang. It's an emotional impact, a jolt to your system, right? Loss of a job, loss of a relationship, loss of a loved one. It's like a emotional impact, because the subconscious is your emotional mind. So that's one way you get an idea from the conscious mind into the subconscious. The other way is through constant spaced repetition, over and over and over. Hence, why every day or every week you're speaking to Rosabella, she's listening to the stuff you're listening to, you're programming these empowering ideas into her. That's why, Bob seen such significant traction by studying this book, Think and Grow Rich, over and over and over and over and over and over. with Zach, listening to that self-talk album by Shad Helmstetter over and over, that's what solidifies it into the subconscious, that constant spaced repetition. And maybe one other thing before I hand back to you, Emma. We were sold the idea that you read something, and if you memorize it and you sit in an exam and you can repeat it, you've got it. And that's why so many people, they know how to do better, but they just simply don't act on it. They do not do it. And the older we get, the more knowledge we gather. So this gap between what we know and what we do, it seems to be getting wider because we've got all of this knowledge, but we're not necessarily doing it. So knowledge is not power. It's only potential power, applied knowledge, internalized knowledge. That's where the power is.
Yeah, very, very powerful.